The galaxy is in a state of total war. Several factions are intertwined in galactic conflict. The two main forces are the Galactic Empire and the Rebel Alliance. The Galactic Empire has declared all-out war to several factions and is to be considered the most dangerous entity in the galaxy. Their intelligence network runs deep, and all around the galaxy they fear their massive AT-ATs. The Rebel Alliance is another major faction, and some say even as strong as the Empire in terms of numbers. They get new recruits every day, but they are spread out, and though having a sublime fleet, do not have the vehicular firepower to take the Empire head-on. The Galactic Republic is the third faction, and in number greater than both the Empire and the Rebels. But the fact that their armies are manufactured gives them a weak point, as their clone manufacture planets can easily be destroyed in an all-out assault. As the clones are waging their own war, it was decided to stay out of the conflict between the Empire and the Rebels. But recently turmoil has surfaced among the clones, as many agreed that they should partake in the war as well. The head of the Republic, the Coruscant Council, debate on what side to choose if forced into the conflict. When it comes to infantry numbers, the highest grossing faction are the Separatists. Being in conflict with the Galactic Republic for a long time has proven many losses, yet their numbers are easily replenished by creating more droids. The droids themselves are considered the weakest enemy, though dangerous in high numbers. The Separatist Council keeps changing location, making it difficult to pinpoint their exact whereabouts. Alongside the four main factions, several sub-factions play their part as well. The Knights of the Old Republic are a small faction that adheres to ancient Sith mandate, being led by the feared Darth Revan. Though small in number, the Knights convince more and more to follow them. Their weak point is their ancient technology. The Hutt Cartel is another faction that plays its part, though avoids getting caught in the battle. It mostly smuggles weapons and information to either two main factions. The Hutt Cartel has been losing members rapidly, as many decided to work as mercenaries for either side. As do the next faction, the Mandalorians, who view the war as their destiny for greatness and glory. Many sympathize with the Empire, and have joined as mercenary captains. Their faction is small, yet there are those who rally troops to convince them to stand as one for Mandalore. Several other factions like the Wookiees do not fight in the conflict, yet get asked to choose a side by messengers often. The leaders of the Wookiees fear an attack to provoke them into conflict as well. All these factions will stand their ground and fight if need be for what they believe in. Welcome to the war. Welcome to Star Wars Factions. The war between the Galactic Empire and the Rebel Alliance has been going on for a while now. Small to medium-sized skirmishes get alternated with giant battles. The economic damage can be felt by other factions in the galaxy as well. As the expenses and logistics are so high and complicated, it is rare that a faction assaults twice in a row with that kind of scale. The Coruscant Council fears that with the expansion of droid factories, the Separatists will create an army that allows them to do this. The Empire currently is assembling a giant army on Hoth. As more and more generals and high officials gather, the Imperial grip on certain planets staggers slightly. Dantooine is one of these places. Both the Hutts and the Rebels saw opportunity, and with Hutt-purchased weaponry, the Rebels pulled off several skirmishes on Imperial outposts. The Imperial higher-ups think it is wise to retaliate, and order several sand troopers to rid a nearby rebel outpost. To keep Imperial casualties to a minimum for the assembly, a bunch of higher Trandoshans from the Hutts joined as well. The sand troopers and Trandoshans were attacking from two sides. The rebels had set up defensive positions and only 2 small entrances gave way to the outpost. The Imperials would use the Trandoshans as meat shields so that they could get through and finish off the rebels. Their plan worked exactly as expected, as the first few Trandoshans took the hits, but managed to slowly take down the rebels. In a short time span, the Imperials were able to rid the outpost of rebels as they fled. Two frightened rebels were still in the outpost, but they panicked and were put down with ease. Though the fight was small in scale, it did not go unnoticed. A young farmer by the name of Cain Mortaza heard the explosions and set out to take a look. But he was not the only one, as the smoke on the horizon could be seen by some Tuscan raiders who had set up a camp nearby. Cain arrived later that evening, and when he tried to take a closer look, the Tuscans opened fire on him. Cain survived as one of the remaining sandtroopers shot at the Tuscans. As the Imperials engaged in combat with the Tuscans, Cain ran into the mountains for safety. He had no idea how much trouble he was going to get for going there. Cain lost his way in the mountains and was not able to get back. He stumbled on a seemingly abandoned hideout. He silently entered and noticed that there were strangers talking to each other. It was the Separatist Council, who had gathered to discuss their next plans. It was rare for the Council to have this many members join a meeting in person. The Council was discussing how to join the main war with the Empire and the rebels. Joining it would create benefit as it allows the Separatists to expand, and they would get access to new technologies and vehicles if they joined a potential ally. But joining the war without warning would make the Separatists look like the aggressor, and lots of citizens would protest or go on strikes. General Grievous proposed the horrifying idea of planning a false flag attack. This meant that the Separatists would carry out an attack against their own people, but make the people believe that it was done by members of the Empire or rebels. Then the citizens of the Separatist systems would feel attacked by those factions and scream for war as the answer. Dooku agreed that it would be wise to play the part of the victim to gain new allies who sympathize with them. They also discussed the expansion and evacuation of the clones' cloners. The Kaminoans were the only ones who mastered the technique of cloning, and the Coruscant Council agreed that expansion was necessary as a precaution in case they got attacked. They tried to keep the expansion on a low profile as it could be seen as an act of aggression. Already there were several protests going on in their capital of Coruscant. Dooku was of the opinion that it was a perfect opportunity for an ambush, as the Kaminoans were now vulnerable. The clones were evacuating the Kaminoans in light transports to keep attention to a minimum. They were escorted by several squads in armor. Scouts walked ahead to check the perimeters. A few droids hid in the forest for an ambush. They were accompanied by a few super battle droids and a spider droid. The droids seized their opportunity to attack and opened fire. The scouts quickly got taken out. Chaos followed as the Kaminoans disembarked and headed for cover, and the clones from the rear rushed in to help. Most of the Kaminoans were able to return quickly and safe, but some decided to fight as well. The other battle droids were not able to do a lot of damage. The super battle droids were bombarding the clones non-stop. With some well-aimed rockets, the clones rid most of the dangerous super battle droids quickly, and now only the spider droid was the real threat left. But the spider droid was slow and big, and got crippled with a rocket to its leg. The clones cleared the regular droids that were left without problem, but several Kaminoans did get taken out, which meant a setback on production. Kane overheard all of the plans, and when it looked like the council was leaving, he ran. But of course his presence was noticed by Dooku, and several deadly destroyer droids were waiting for him at the entrance. For a single moment, Kane thought he was done for, but suddenly he was saved by a bunch of strangers. They were part of the Rebel Alliance, but dressed in civilian and improvised military gear, so they could perform action without drawing attention to the Rebel Alliance itself. Kane explained what he heard, and the Rebel fighters thought it would be wise to escort Kane to Captain Wedge Antilles and tell him of the Separatist plans. Kane was brought on a Rebel transport ship, where part of the crew was already awaiting him. Kane arrived on one of the Rebel transports and was awaited by C-3PO and R2-D2. They escorted him to Captain Wedge Antilles, and Kane informed him of the situation regarding the Separatist plans. Captain Antilles made sure all the high-ranking members of the Rebel Alliance got the news as well, so that the news would spread like wildfire. If the news of the false flag attack could become a common rumor among civilians in the galaxy, the Separatists might withhold out of fear for backlash. Besides that, the Rebels' hands were bound. An operation that took months of planning was about to go underway. The rebels had managed to deceive the Empire by leaking fake intel, letting them think that the rebels were about to assault on Endor. The Empire decided to send their main force orbiting Jakku to Endor as reinforcements. But there would not be an assault on Endor, and by moving their forces, the Star Destroyers that were left above Jakku were spread out. A perfect opportunity to take them out from the inside. 3 months earlier, the rebels managed to capture an Imperial shuttle and use this to smuggle a small group of rebels on board of one of the Star Destroyers. The rebels were heavily outnumbered, but the element of surprise was on their side. If they were fast enough, they could take the colossal ship down and escape in time. The unsuspecting crew of the Star Destroyer quickly took heavy losses as the rebels proceeded through the hallway. By this time, the shots were heard, and the rebels caught on security cameras. Imperial reinforcements were inbound, but it would take them a little while to reach the main center. Blaster fire and grenades were thoroughly exchanged. Since they only had a small window of time left, the rebels pushed hard. The few stormtroopers that were left in front of them got pushed back further and further. They had now reached the door to the main center, and the stormtroopers desperately requested the door to be opened. The rebels had taken several losses, but still had the manpower to push forward as long as the reinforcements had not arrived yet. The main center opened its doors, and the few stormtroopers that were stationed there tried their best to win time. However, they got taken out quickly and relentlessly. The rebels headed in and shot the main officers quickly. They held the crew at gunpoint and ordered them to overload the destroyer's core, resulting in a meltdown and the destruction of the ship. Once the destruction was underway, the rebels shot the rest of the crew without remorse and retreated. The rebels who managed to survive were able to escape in the nick of time as the reinforcements had arrived. The Star Destroyer was destroyed, and even though destroying one single Star Destroyer of the Empire meant nothing to their size and number, it made all the difference in morale. The rebels showed the Empire it was vulnerable and that only a small group of people were enough to destroy them from the inside. The Emperor was furious and executed several of his intelligence officers. Rumors spread through the galaxy that maybe the Empire was not so powerful after all, and that a third faction could join the war if it thought it was strong enough. Lord Vader himself took charge of the retaliation process. He waited until a large outpost of rebels on Dantooine were mostly asleep. Then he would strike swift and hard to let the rebels know their place. With most of the rebels sleeping, stealth was at their side. But stealth has never been the Empire's preferred way.
The AT-AT, the all-terrain armored transport, the tour de force of the Galactic Empire. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of the mighty walkers, but few had seen one and lived to tell the tale. The attacks were devastating, but production of the AT-ATs was very expensive. It wasn't unheard of that an AT-AT got destroyed, and each one taken out was a huge loss for the Empire. As the Empire had only a limited number to deploy, they were only used in critical battles where a loss was not an option or showcase of their power. After the destruction of the Imperial Star Destroyer, Lord Vader thought a showcase of their power was necessary. Several Shadow Troopers and an AT-AT were deployed near a rebel outpost on Dantooine. Most of the rebels were asleep, so their security was at a minimum.
The stomping sound of the AT-AT thundered in the distance, and from the fog bright lights appeared. The rebel towers opened fire as the Shadow Troopers rushed inside. The alarm was raised and the rebels scrambled from their posts as their buildings came under heavy fire. The rebel armor that was fight-ready bombarded the Shadow Troopers with devastating results, but was not able to penetrate the walker shields. It took a long time for the armor to reload, and it got taken out by the superior AT-AT. The Shadow Troopers spread through the outposts and completely overwhelmed the remaining rebels. Many of the rebel soldiers did not have their weapon at the ready and fled. The mighty AT-AT also had reached the outpost and fired on the fleeing rebels as well. The few rebels who managed to flee were hunted down as their former outpost was burned to the ground. The rebels had paid a terrible price for their short-lived victory. The Empire's vengeance did not stop there, as other retaliation squads were sent out to different planets. The main army on Hoth would stay there in a state of high alert. For now, the Empire would withhold from making any drastic move until it was clear how deep the repercussions were of their lost Star Destroyer. The Emperor knew that even with the retaliation, their name had been damaged. People expected the clones or Separatists to join the war. Therefore, it came as a big surprise that it was the Mandalorian army who declared war to the Rebel Alliance and Galactic Empire first. As the Mandalorians assembled and prepared to move out, the rest of the galaxy held its breath. The Emperor knew of the fearlessness and combat skills they possessed, but also respected the fact that they announced their declaration of war verbally instead of a sneak attack, a strategy other factions were known to do. There was honor in the way the Mandalorians worked, and the Emperor knew it still had a bit of time before the Mandalorians would strike first. The Imperial higher-ups agreed to continue the retaliation process on the rebels, not only for revenge on the taken out Star Destroyer, but also to make them more of an appealing target for the Mandalorians. One of the many targets was a small mining facility that the rebels took over from the Imperials a while back. General Organa gave the order for many rebels to evacuate, spread out, and stay low until the Imperial retaliations were over. But since the mining facilities had good defenses including Imperial bunkers, the rebels at the facility were advised to hold position there. The facility was surrounded by steep canyons, making it impossible to attack with walkers. The narrow paths also meant the ability for crowd control, as large armies could not advance all at once. But the Empire exploited the one weakness the Maze of Canyons gave, which was the ability to attack from multiple sides. Sand troopers and stormtroopers approached the facility from different areas. The rebels had set up defenses and had several scouts overlooking the canyon. The Imperial troops who were advancing in the center got hit the hardest. A deadly wall of blaster fire halted their movement. The blaster fire was heard by the other Imperial squads as well, and they started to rush in, but had to deal with several rebel lookouts. As more and more troops were lost in the center, the right flanking squad managed to get rid of the scouts. They proceeded to aid the center squad. Being attacked from two sides proved too much and the rebels quickly fell. Some of the rebels hid behind the rocks, but the troopers rushed in to break their defense. When the main defense force was taken out, the troopers who were wounded patched themselves up, and they proceeded to the bunker. A few remaining rebels were guarding the bunker, but they lacked proper cover. It did not take long or much effort for the Imperials to corner the rebels and expose them. When the battle was over, the rest of the rebels hiding in the bunker were taken out, escorted, and executed. Amongst these were several political representatives from Coruscant, who were negotiating trade agreements with the rebels in a time of war. As suspected, the political repercussions were huge. Some even say that the rebels deliberately ordered the rebels and representatives to avoid fleeing in the hopes they were killed to spark a conflict with Coruscant. There was no denying that the Coruscant people felt attacked and demanded justice. The party in support of joining the war grew in numbers rapidly, yet there were still those who pleaded to avoid getting involved. As the Jedi Council discussed what to do, the streets of Coruscant grew wild and dangerous, as supporters of both political stances were ready to exchange fists. The Imperial retaliation was coming to a close. Most of the rebels had fled and went into hiding in several systems. Some were not able to make it in time and got taken out by the Imperial fleet. The Emperor knew it had to prepare for the incoming Mandalorians. On Coruscant, chaos had broken out as both war supporters and anti-war parties clashed with each other. Both parties were daring the other to make the first move as verbal threats and glimpses of weapons were exchanged. One shot could escalate civil riots. Amongst the crowds there were several mercenaries. They had no particular interest in politics, but were always up for a good fight. They were the ones who shot first, and chaos erupted as many unarmed civilians ran for cover. Others who were armed started to fire at one another. Most of the civilians were untrained, and the battle was sloppy and brutal. Those without weapons tried to pick up the ones beside fallen civilians, but quickly got taken out. Not only out in the open, but also in several buildings, things started to go haywire as rioters broke in and started shooting. The space terminal was used as a last hiding spot by many. But here, the rioters entered as well, and killed many innocents. Amongst the ones in the space terminal there was Boba Fett, one of Jabba's loyal bounty hunters. He was in Coruscant for business and found himself in the middle of the riots by accident. He was way more skilled than the average civilian and was able to fend them off. Many civilians had informed Coruscant police, and the shocking images of the space terminal security cameras spread like wildfire on the local network. As the situation was considered out of control, the police were allowed to use lethal force. In order to keep police casualties at a minimum, they used police droids as well. The police started to engage with the rioters and many fled. Others stood their ground and got shredded by blaster fire. In the chaos, many unarmed civilians lost their lives as well. Several droids were lost, as were some forces of the police. Things took a turn for the worse when the police got outflanked by a large group of mercenaries and heavily armed rioters. The police was forced to run for their lives. The streets were taken back by the rioters, who started to destroy public property. The Jedi Council had been informed on the situation and ordered commandos to sweep the streets. Rioters had arrived at the Jedi Temple as well, but withheld from violence as the entrance was blocked by the elite guards. That was no battle they could win. The commandos arrived at the riot scene and started to take the rioters under fire. They were no match for the heavy equipment that the commandos were carrying. A few tried to fight, but were taken out in seconds. A few managed to run away and others surrendered and got arrested by the commandos. But most lay dead in the streets of Coruscant. Silence finally returned, and the public waited for a political statement from the Jedi Council. The Council announced it had not come to a decision yet to join the war. Their clone facilities were too precious, and it would only take a few large-scale Imperial attacks to cripple the Republic's army. The Jedi would continue their debate on whether to join the war or not shortly. Too much blood had been spilled today already. The incident at Coruscant had caught the entire galaxy's attention. A perfect opportunity for the Separatists to act unnoticed. They already managed to set up 2 new droid factories on different planets, and their next planned destination was Mustafar. But there, they would meet with resistance they did not expect. The Mandalorians had arrived. They had landed on a minor jungle planet that was held by the Empire. The Imperial higher-ups' plan to weaken the rebels, therefore making them an easier target to the Mandalorians, had failed. The Empire was not prepared in that area of space and gave the order to set up defenses immediately. The planet's surface was full of thick jungle, making it difficult for smaller walkers to advance. But the rough terrain would be no problem for the mighty Mandalorian armor. At this same time, the Separatists had landed on Mustafar to expand their droid factories. Darth Malak, high-ranking warlord of the Knights of the Old Republic, was currently stationed on Mustafar in search of ancient Sith artifacts. The Knights were suddenly disturbed by the invading Separatists, who had no idea that Malak was currently there. As the Separatists started to unload their first droids, Malak lay waiting to ambush them. When a sizable group of droids had been deployed, they started to head out. Malak's forces could already see them approaching and were confident in withstanding the attack. Malak set up turrets and sharpshooters on the flanks and even had a heavy artillery turret at the ready. When the front group of the droids had reached the bridge, the soldiers of the Old Republic opened fire on them. As the group of droids was clutched together at the bridge's entrance, they were an extremely easy target. Malak's sharpshooters had the least amount of cover, and some of the droids managed to take out a few of them. It did not take long before the artillery played its part as well, and decimated a large group of droids with each shot. The droids stood no chance and were not able to take the bridge. As a final push, Malak ordered some of the walkers at his disposal to engage as well. And he let some of his knights draw the droids back. The droids fell back to regroup as they saw the cloaked warriors, but some were taken out before they succeeded. As the droids had regrouped and the knights slowly retreated back, the droids made one final push with a large assault. An assault that came to a rude stop by the deadly wall of blaster and artillery fire. Malak's men enjoyed an easy victory as they lay waste to the battlefield. As the droids proved no match for Malak and his troopers, the invasion of Mustafar was abandoned. As the Separatists still had an invasion fleet at the ready, they set course to a new destination, Naboo. Though Naboo did have a defense force, they claimed to stay neutral in the war. Reinforcements from other factions would not reach Naboo in time to help, meaning that the Separatists could expand their factories on Naboo without major resistance. Morning had finally come, and the Imperial troops were waiting for the Mandalorians' attack to commence. The Imperials were short on resources and walkers in this area, but reinforcements were on the way. But if they would reach the defending troopers in time, would have to be seen. The jungle trembles as the Mandalorians approach. Thick jungle hides the massive size of the warrior horde. The Imperials have set up defenses at a small bridge along a river. Many soldiers fear the moment the battle erupts. Commander Squira was in command and received orders to defend the area. He had direct contact with the battlefront and set up 2 defensive lines. But Squira knew that the Mandalorians would most likely overwhelm them, as they were short on troops and walkers. To create a choke point, the Imperials blew up a nearby bridge, so that they could focus all fire on the one remaining. Word had gotten around that reinforcing walkers were on their way. The few walkers that were available were set up to fire at the clearing in front of the forest. Squira also had a small bomber squad available, and he sent 2 of them for a bombing run to weaken the first wave of the Mandalorians. As the bombs devastated the terrain, the Mandalorians leaped from the bushes. A massive firefight unfolded as the Mandalorian forces became visible to Imperial eyes. The walkers had clear visibility as well, but the disadvantage was that they were visible and vulnerable too. The Mandalorian soldiers spread out in the grass and gave each other covering fire as the armor rolled in. The Imperials were under constant fire, but tried their best to take out the approaching Mandalorians. More experienced Mandalorian warriors had reached the river, and the Imperial soldiers lost men quickly. The Mandalorian armor was relentless as well, and with each deafening blast they advanced further. Many Mandalorians were firing from the riverbank, and Imperial units were dying left and right. The weak armor of the walkers was also easily destroyed, and things looked hopeless for the Imperial troops. The Mandalorians crossed the bridge to take out the few remaining stormtroopers. Then the Mandalorian troops were surprised by sudden explosions as the reinforcing walkers had arrived. A group of ATSTs greeted the invading Mandalorians with a barrage of blaster fire. The Mandalorian advance came to a halt. The ATSTs fired at the troops in armor on the other side of the river and managed to do some massive damage. But too many Mandalorian tanks had already reached the river area and had spread out. Though the walkers were able to take out a few of the tanks, the Mandalorian armor still proved superior. The Mandalorians, in the end, were able to advance across the river. Meanwhile on Naboo, the Separatist invasion was making great progress. Many cities and villages were taken without a fight, but the native Gungan tribes said they would not go down without resisting. The droids were ready for a clash with the natives. The battle was never fair to begin with. The Gungans did not possess any blasters and it was a slaughter from the get-go. Some of the Gungans managed to take out some of the droids with grenades, but this was way too inaccurate to be effective. The droids struck down hard with blaster and cannon fire. It was an absolute genocide. The Gungans saw their defeat was imminent, and many ran, only to be mowed down. In reality, the Gungans hoped that the defense force of Theed would come to their rescue, but they never even showed a glimpse. The droids hunted the fleeing Gungans down and claimed victory over their territories. Back at the Imperial defense, several hours had passed. The second line of defense was waiting for the Mandalorians as well. This defense line was also heavily under-equipped, but it had several walkers by their side. The Mandalorians drew near, but refrained from firing as they had not been noticed yet. The forest in front of the Imperial troops was dead silent, but then out of the bushes the Mandalorians engaged. The walkers concentrated fire on the tree line as the Mandalorians emerged once again. While being covered from the tree line, several Mandalorians crossed the open area between the forest and the Imperial defense. The Mandalorian soldiers kept constant pressure on the stormtroopers so that they got shot the moment they showed themselves. A few Mandalorians managed to slip past Imperial defenses and started taking them out from the flank. The troopers could not hold the attack as they got shot from two sides. The remaining ATST was still trying to hold out, and surprisingly managed to do some proper damage. But it was already too late as the Mandalorians had broken Imperial defense and took out any fleeing troops. The Mandalorians had won, and now there was nothing left between them and Squire's command center. Squire would have to make an important decision: stand and fight, or evacuate. And at that exact same time, Separatist forces entered the capital city of Theed. But this time, the defense force would bare its teeth. Squire's base of operation was on full alert. Squire had decided it would be best to evacuate as they did not possess the man and firepower to deal with the Mandalorians. As the first troops headed towards the transport ships, the defending troops were looking at the forest line to spot the Mandalorians. Something in the bushes moved, and the Imperial towers unleashed hell. The forest in which the Mandalorians were hiding got shredded as they returned fire. The stormtroopers who were ordered to defend were no match and were killed instantly. More troops reached the land transports as the battle raged on behind them. Some support was provided by the turrets on the transports. The Mandalorian forces drew near and had taken out several of the Imperial defensive units already. One Mandalorian tank, which was hidden from Imperial sight due to the devastated forest, got a direct hit on an ATST, resulting in part of the ATST crushing a building in which Skyra and several high-ranking officers were hiding. The first of the land transports took off as some of the airships were still being loaded up. The Mandalorians had reached the center and were able to do damage from the inside. A bombardment of grenades and artillery fire brought the Imperial base of operations to the ground. Many lives were lost, but the transports managed to escape in the nick of time. Meanwhile, Naboo's capital city, Theed, was bleeding. The Separatist forces displayed a dominating performance, wiping out Theed's defensive force with relative ease. All throughout the city, skirmishes broke out. It was utter chaos as troops clashed within the squares and alleyways. Some of Theed's defensive units fought to the bitter end, and one pilot even took out a large enemy force when they had shot him down. But most of the guards decided to run. The main square would soon be overtaken, and all seemed lost. The droids managed to capture Queen Amidala, and Naboo surrendered. It was now under Separatist control. In response to the Mandalorian attack, the Empire ordered an immediate invasion of Kashyyyk. Kashyyyk was well defendable, and the Empire wanted to use Kashyyyk as a buffer for the next Mandalorian attack. The native Wookiees were considered primitive, so they should be taken care of easily. The Imperial's presence did not go unnoticed, and the Wookiees pleaded for help. This was the final nudge the Coruscant politicians needed to get the declaration of war signed. Coruscant and their massive clone army had entered the war.